Well, I remember that Sunday morning at church pretty well. The last words of the song, As the Deer, had just finished on the overhead projector, and we all knew that it was time to sit down because we looked in our church bulletin, which had the printed order of service right in there, and it said, "Please be seated," after the song. And then a dad who happened to be the Sunday school director, and he got up and he shared a testimony of how God had provided in amazing ways for his 20-something son. You see, his son had been looking for a new job, and at just the right time, God provided this amazing job. But it was a state away, and how were they going to be able to find housing for his son and his family to move up there? Well, I'll tell you how, the dad said, as he excitedly pounded the large wooden homemade pulpit in excitement. He said when they were up there looking for the job, they also had time to look for housing, and God provided the perfect house, close to the school, close to work, and close to this new store called Walmart. Yeah, that one got dozens of amens from the congregation, but it didn't end there. Another short-lived concern is that one of the grandkids had a special health condition. But because God is just so good, they happened to be moving to a place right near where some of the best doctors for this condition were, and the job was providing amazing health insurance to be able to cover the costs of those doctors. And I just remember us all sitting there amazed at God's provision while the vocalist came up to sing the newest Amy Grant song that had just came out. It was a great morning. Well, yeah, it's funny to remember what church used to be like, right? And it's kind of fun to talk about some of the ways that God provides for us. That's what we're going to dive into today. Our theme for this morning is this: God provides. And we're going through our Exodus series. We're 16 chapters into this story. And like a church person, when the pastor is still preaching at 12:30, the Israelites are hungry, okay? And we're going to see that God provides, but sometimes it's the way that our nice, neat testimonies wish he would, but sometimes it's not in those nice, easy ways. And so Exodus 16, we're going to dive into verses 1 to 3, and as we read it, I want to encourage you to look for some of the ways that you see God providing in these verses here. And it goes like this: the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by Yahweh's hand in Egypt. And there we sat around pots of meat," whatever. "And we ate all the food that we wanted," whatever. "But you have brought us into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death." Sounds like they're really enjoying their journey so far, right? They're really having a great time. And they're in a place that pretty much no one wants to be in, and that's the desert. But yet they're right where God wants them to be. Well, how do I know that? Because Exodus 31 tells us that the Lord, he's been leading them by a pillar of cloud by day and by a pillar of fire at night. And so check this out. If God has led them to the desert, then God is providing the desert. Would you agree with that? I think so. I think God is providing this. And so check this out. We've seen God provide some pretty amazing stuff for his people throughout the book of Exodus already. We've seen the plagues and how God has used them to deliver the people from slavery. We've seen the parting of the Red Sea. We've seen Pharaoh's army destroyed. And now we see God providing desert, because sometimes God provides desert. And so a little math here. I don't know if you're good at math, but we'll keep your brain working a little bit this morning. We know that they left on the 15th day of the first month. And now what day is it? It's the 15th day of the second month. So how long have they been going on their journey so far? A month. Yeah, 30 days. I mean, what is wrong with these people? 30 days into their journey, and they're already grumbling. They've forgotten everything that God has done for them so far. They're complaining about the leaders that God has put ahead of them. I know that you and I have never done that. They're complaining against God himself. Does all that sound familiar? Well, it sure does. Because when we stop pointing the finger at their faults, we begin to look at our own lives and see how similar that we are. And so God provides desert, and what do the Israelites do? It says, because they knew and had seen God's provision, they completely trust God in the desert. No, that's not at all what it says. It says they grumbled when God provided them desert. And then what they do is they begin to idealize the past. They remember it as better than it really was. They're like, oh, back in the day, back in Egypt, I could go to Chipotle and Heartland Barbecue and Zio's Pizza anytime I wanted. It was so good back there in Egypt. Anybody likes any of those restaurants? Oh, those are my favorites. If you need gift ideas or anything like that. But isn't that where a lot of our grumbling comes from? When we maybe remember the past as a little better than it was, and we kind of compare that to our present. Maybe a past relationship that's better, that we remember as better than it really was, and it impacts a current relationship or a current marriage that we have now. Or maybe you found yourself at the point where you compare a previous church or a previous pastor or the way church used to be, and you compare it to the way things are now, and you just don't like it, and bitterness and maybe complaining begins to set in. And because of that bitterness, because of that complaining, it gets in the way of us worshiping God or us serving in church now. Or maybe instead of being fully engaged in our current stage of life, we look back to a previous stage of life that we maybe liked better. Maybe when we were single, or when we were newly married, or when we had young kids, or when we had kids at home. I mean, all of these and other stages of life, they're great stages, but when we look back to them and we miss opportunities in the now, that's when we get ourselves into trouble. And so I wonder, what if instead of complaining and grumbling, what if we approached desert with this kind of a mindset? We would say, God has provided this for me, and God is a good God, and so I'm just going to rest. I don't want to rush this desert. Come to God from a place of, God, would you please deliver me from this desert, but until your exact, perfect timing moves me out of it, I want to stay here, and I want to learn what you want me to learn in the desert, because God provides desert. But why? Why does he do that? We don't often get the answer why, but we get the benefit this time of seeing the answer why, but we have to fast forward ahead to Deuteronomy chapter 8. We're fast forwarding 40 years ahead, in fact, and the Israelites, they're about ready to finally enter the promised land after all their desert wandering, and they're looking back, and God gives them a glimpse of why he's allowed this to happen. It's not going to be on your screens. I just want you to listen to it. Deuteronomy 8, verse 2, and you pick up some of the whys that God would allow this, and it says this, verse 2, remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years to humble and to test you in order to know that what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Your clothes did not wear out, your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord God disciplines you. And so check this out. God provides in the desert. Their clothes didn't wear out. Their feet didn't become swollen. And there is a purpose to the desert, to humble us and to test us. You know, we tend to grip our comforts, and our priorities and our sins so tightly that only by driving us to the desert can God remove our grip on those things. And so instead of struggling in the desert, rest, because God has great things for us in the desert. And so God provides this desert, and they grumble, and then it gets so bad in verse 3 that they say this, you brought us into the desert to starve us to death. Now, if you were God, put yourselves in the shoes of God, what would you have done at this point, okay? You probably would have done something like this. You would have said, I will rain down fire and brimstone, and I'm going to wipe you from the face of this earth. But instead, God, in his amazing grace for the Israelites and his amazing grace for us, instead of raining that down on him, he says, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. I will rain down bread for you. And we're going to read what happens and the ways that God is going to rain down his provision on the Israelites. It's Exodus 16, verses 11 through 21. I just want you to see God providing for them over and over in these verses. And it goes like this. Yahweh said to Moses, I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites, and I'm going to provide some bread. And he says, tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you'll be filled with bread. And then you will know that I am the Lord your God. And so that evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is this? This is manna. They literally called it, what is it? Or in our phrase today, we could call it whatchamacallit. They might have said like, dude, you should invent butter. I would put that on my whatchamacallit every day to make it taste better, okay? Whatchamacallit. They didn't know what it was, for they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. And this is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. And now I've got a Coke 2-liter with me. This is not my water bottle for today. This is about what an omer roughly is, okay? And so I would love for us to remember a 2-liter bottle just as a symbol of God providing for us, because that's what we're talking about today, right, is God providing for us. And so when you go to the grocery store and you walk down the aisle and there's like thousands of 2-liters, I want you to have in your mind, oh yeah, God is a God who provides for us. Or when you're at home and you see a 2-liter and you're pouring that, you say, God provides for us. I bought this last night and I said to my kids, can you please drink all of this tonight so that I can use it as a sermon illustration tomorrow? And they did a great job with that. Thank you guys. And then they went to bed at 1 a.m. So God provides for them. So they were to take about that much of it for each person. And the Israelites, it says, they did just as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as much as he needed. And then Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it, though, until morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. And each morning everyone gathered as much as he needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. And so what does God provide in these verses? God provides manna. He provides for their everyday need. I mean, think about how awesome it is how God provides for them in this passage. He provides exactly what they need when they need it. They never had too little. And all they had to do is just walk out the flap of their tent, and it was right there for them. That's how God provided for them back in the day, and God hasn't changed a bit. He's still that same God to us now. Now, I wonder if you could transport yourself back to that Israelite camp, and you could walk from tent to tent, and you could ask them, what do you think your biggest need is? What do you think they would have said? I think they would have said, we need to be back in Egypt is what we need because, well, at least we had food when we were back there. It's funny how we think we know what we need. We think what we need is God giving us what we want, when we want it, all the time. And now we don't say that out loud, right? Because that's not very spiritual to talk that way, but really that's probably what we want. We want that job, we want that healing, we want that problem to just go away. We want a little bit more financial security, a little bit more in our retirement accounts, and then we'll be happy. We want that tension to be resolved. We want that anxiety or that addiction removed, and we want that all done in our way, in our timing. But maybe the process that God is taking us through isn't just a quick fix. Maybe it requires some desert and some manna. I mean, what if we received instant answers to all our prayers? Wouldn't that just put us back in slavery? Would God have your attention and my attention if he just provided everything we wanted when we wanted that? Would God be able to shape us through the process of desert if we never had to walk through desert? Or is it just our desire to be comfortable and move back to this place where we have everything in control, where we don't need God anymore? Listen, it's okay to pray for what you need. You should pray for what you need. But sometimes we maybe need to take a step back and examine our motives and examine our reasons for wanting to get out of the desert so quickly, because we may be attempting to walk back into slavery with some of the things we're asking God for. God brings desert, and every time he brings it, it's for our good. Now, I know that in this size of a room, there's got to be some people who are doubting, is God even a good God? Check this out. Even though the Israelites, we never get word that they pray one time in this passage. And even though they don't pray, God provides them with this abundance of food. Check this out. God, he's so good that he meets many of our needs without us even ever praying about them. Think about your day already today. What kind of needs has God met in your life that you haven't even prayed about yet? And yet God still loves to meet those needs. In fact, God is so good that even when we choose to grumble and complain, he still meets our needs. He gives us what we need. Because God is a God who sees the needs of his people, and he meets the needs of his people. He responds to us. So what do they do when God meets their needs with this manna? Well, they respond by controlling and by worrying. They were worried that a 2-liter wasn't going to be enough, and so verse 20 tells us that they kept more for the next day. And what happened to that stuff that they kept? It says it was full of maggots and it began to smell. Yum. That reminds me of the guys' dorm on the 3rd morning of fall retreat. That smell, right? By the way, we're looking for some more high school leaders if any of you are interested. And we don't have time to read the whole passage here, but if you go on, the story goes like this. You'd see that on 6 days of the week, they were to gather that morning what they needed for that day. But the 7th day was a Sabbath, and there wasn't going to be any bread. It was a day of rest. And so on the 6th day, God was going to give them enough manna for the 6th day and the 7th day. And so on the morning of the 6th day, they would just have to go out and gather it then, and that's all they need. But what did the people end up doing on the 7th day? Yeah, you're right. You guessed it. They go out on the morning to try to gather some more. Worrying, controlling. I mean, even after they've seen God's provision, it's like every time something new comes their way, they start with zero faith. I mean, the hope would be, right, that they would build, that they would see what he's done and keep building on that faith, but they keep starting back as if they've never seen God do anything before, running around like chickens with their heads cut off. But don't we do that too? How many days have you been alive? And yet God has met your need every single one of those days. How many times have you read about God's faithfulness in his word and just over and over again seeing him be faithful to his people? How many times have you experienced God's faithfulness in your life, in other people's lives around you, but yet this afternoon something's crazy going to go on in our life and we're just going to freak out like we've never seen or experienced God do anything before. We're worrying, controlling instead of trusting him. Oh, that God would just grow us to the point where our first reaction is to trust in him. And so that manna, God's providing this, but that manna is also a test. Not a test like you would take in school, like a pass-fail kind of things, because the Israelites, they were already in. They've already passed. If you and I have Jesus Christ as your Savior, we've already passed. So it's not that kind of a test, but it's more like a test of a parent or a good mentor who is trying to develop character and perseverance in their child or in this person. And so they put tests in front of them for their development, for their growth. And so God is moving the Israelites towards more of a moment-by-moment dependence upon himself, and God is moving you and I towards more of a moment-by-moment dependence on him. That's the kind of relationship he wants with us. And so God provides desert, and God provides manna, and those things are good. But then in John 6, we see the fullness of God's provision. This is so good because Jesus, he fulfills all the Old Testament provisions of God the Father. In John 6, verse 30, it goes like this. They ask Jesus, "What miraculous sign then will you give that we may see it and believe in you?" This is a crowd that's talking to him. What are you going to do, Jesus? Our forefathers, they ate the manna in the desert. As it's written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth. It's not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it's my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, from now on, give us this bread. And then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never grow hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty. God has provided Jesus. And just like the manna was God's provision for daily life for the Israelites in the desert, Jesus, he is our daily bread. He is the true bread that gives us life. And just like God provided manna and he gave them instructions on how to go out and get it, God has provided Jesus for us, and it's up to us to pursue him, to go after him, to receive this bread of life that he's offering. Jesus, he's done 99.9% of the work, and all we have to do is pursue him. And he's inviting us to find our salvation, our provision, our daily bread in him. But God doesn't just simply exist to meet our needs. He does this, and he desires to make us his people, to make us like Jesus, and to use us in the world around us, like that song that we just sang. But what we have to do is what we tend to do is we tend to live on the idea of, if I live right, then my life is going to go right. And when life doesn't go right, I either blame myself because I must have messed up, or I blame God because he hasn't been faithful to help me. And if that's how you live life, with that philosophy, you're going to die in the desert. I mean, what if your joy wasn't dependent on whether or not you were in the desert? What if the desert has already been overcome? Jesus, he was tested in the desert, and he was absolutely obedient. The Spirit drove him to the desert. He lived the life that you and I could never live. He died the death that you and I could never die. And Jesus passed the desert and the manna test for us. And only when we realize that Jesus is all we have will you be willing to look at your desert through God's eyes and the process through which God is driving us into needing only Jesus in our lives, needing only Jesus for our daily food. God's goal for us is not that we have this perfect testimony of him providing for us exactly how and when we want, but his goal is to make us like Jesus, to make us desperately cling to him for our daily bread. God will lovingly test you. He will lead you. He will take you to uncomfortable places, but the daily manna that you need, Jesus himself, he's always with you. That's how God provides. It's a daily dying to ourselves and a moment-by-moment act of saying, Jesus, you are my food. Jesus, you are enough for me today. Jesus, I won't grumble because I have you. And as you lean into Jesus, your appetite begins to change. You no longer crave the old food that you had when you were in slavery, but you begin to crave Jesus because he is all you need. God provides. God has provided Jesus. I wonder how you're going to respond to that. So as we kind of wind down this morning, I want to give us some time just for some individual prayer. Prayer is just us talking to God. And I'm going to ask you to pray about a couple different things. And the first one, I'm going to have you bow your heads and close your eyes. And I just want to give you some time to talk to God about your needs. What are you needing God to provide in your life right now? He knows already, but just talk to him about it. Tell him about it and ask him, beg him for his provision in your life. Go ahead and take a moment and pray about that. And God, we believe that you know the need of every single person in this room. Even before we mentioned it to you just now. And not only are you a God who knows it, but a God who is powerful enough to do something about those needs. And so I pray in your powerful name that you would work, that you would open the floodgates of heaven, and that you would do amazing things, not so that we can be comfortable and move back into slavery, but so that we can say, look how good God is, and that our faith would build because we've seen you meet our needs. So God, in a very real and a very individual way, would you just meet each person who prayed that prayer where they're at right now, in Jesus' name, amen. And then the second prayer I want to invite you to pray with our time is just a prayer simply saying, God, your will be done. And that first prayer was a bold prayer of, God, would you meet my need? Would you do something in this? But this second prayer is just an act of us bending our knee and saying, Jesus, you know everything I need. And you know how long desert is best for me. And so I just submit, here's what I would love for you to do, but your will be done. That's really where I want to be, Jesus. And so just take another moment to pray, Jesus, your will be done in these needs. And so, God, we've come to you and we've prayed boldly. And now we come to you humbly and we say, your will be done. God, for each of these needs that we have, we say, your will be done. Keep us in the desert if you need us to stay in the desert. That's a tough prayer to pray, God, but we know that your ways are better than our ways, that you are much higher than us, and so we submit to your sovereignty and to your plan because you are a God who is always good. God, your will be done in our church and in our lives and in our families and in our community. In Jesus' name, amen.